So let's begin, Magnus, with you, Magnus Magnusson from the UNESCO, and you're on. Where are you?
Thank you, dear Governor.
Right. Okay.
It's a real pleasure to be on the call. Thank you for the organizers and excellencies. I am representing UNESCO and Ms. Gabriela Ramos, who is our Assistant Director General for the Social Human Sciences, who cannot be with us here today for a very important reason. And that reason is, in fact, that as we speak this week, 193 member states and their representatives are negotiating a text which will be the first ethical normative instrument on artificial intelligence. This instrument has been under preparation for over a year in consultation with experts. It's been drafted by experts, but then also it has been vetted by local communities, by civic society, private sector representatives, scientific institutions and think tanks, all in all 50,000 contributions and comments to the text that have been collected and integrated into a revised draft document, which is then today being negotiated with among member states of UNESCO, and in total we have 193 member states. This is an ethical instrument, which in UNESCO's language is a recommendation, which means this is the second highest level of legally binding international instrument that UNESCO has at its disposal. The highest would be a convention, like the Convention Against Doping in Sports, for example, which is also UNESCO, or of course all the cultural conventions that you probably are familiar with. A convention becomes becomes local national law, whereas a recommendation is not binding, but there is a reporting structure on it, which allows us also to support member states who are not feeling that they have the capacity to implement what they signed up for. So linked to the recommendation, if approved by member states during the governing conference in November, will be a global program with several regional, sub-regional and national intervention logics that will support member states in understanding their risks and their opportunities related to artificial intelligence. There will be an ethical impact assessment done and a readiness assessment and index regarding artificial intelligence in the local context. So this will be the programmatic support UNESCO will provide to member states who request us to support them. Now, just specifically as the as Ms. Kukri just mentioned, sorry if I expelled your name wrong, pronounced your name wrong. This is specifically an ethical instrument. So what does that mean? Well, ethics as a dynamic basis for the normative evaluation and guidance of AI technologies, referring to human dignity, well-being, and the prevention of harm as a compass and rooted in the ethics of science and technology. And UNESCO is the UN lead on the ethics of science and technology and also on bioethics. So we work on many dimensions, including some very practical ones like the access of refugees to healthcare, or some of the spearheading technologies like genome engineering, another very, very important issue, by the way, of course, that needs to be really tackled internationally. Of course, AI technologies are always evolving, so inclusive and pluralistic ethical reflections is really constantly required. And ethics as a dynamic process does not refer to a change in values, but to adapt existing frameworks as required ensures that values are always respected. Also, ethical frameworks are designed to provide a response in cases where regulation does not or cannot exist. And an example of this, which is very current and important for us in this unprecedented situation we're in for this generation, namely the pandemic, is that it's from the start, it was quite hard for many countries to know how to tackle the pandemic in terms of either a political or policy or regulatory approach versus a hands-off scientific approach to let the scientists speak. I'm Swedish. In my own country, we took the latter approach, where the scientists were given the center stage. The problem was that there was no science related to this virus. Mm-hmm. So what do you do? And this is really what created a lot of confusion and pain, because there was very little guidance that could actually be provided. And there was a guessing game, which was very much related to maintaining the credibility of the authorities versus actually changing your story as science came along. So the ethical perspectives could have been an alternative to approach this situation, which in fact also UNESCO with other international and regional organizations did tackle by issuing statements that were presented on national level in the appropriate fora, but maybe not as much listened to in terms of what do you do when you don't have the science and when politics really can't do much either. What do you do? And of course, it comes back to the do no harm, to the dimension of making sure you understand the most vulnerable populations and really go into depth in understanding their situation and vulnerability specifically, which some countries did and others did not do as well. Much has been said about the dimensions on cultural diversity. Obviously, this is one of UNESCO's core areas of work. So let me just give you a few examples of how not cultural diverse the current internet is, and therefore a lot of the AI technology is currently not either. As you know, much of AI technology is geographically concentrated in the hands of a few private tech companies. In fact, according to MIT, the world's 13 most important AI firms are based in the US, China, Japan, and Europe. None in the rest of the world. Those companies are located in the richest countries such as the US, China, and Japan. These countries account for most AI peer-reviewed publications and patent applications according to the OECD AI Policy Observatory. According to the Stanford HAI AI Index 2021 report, South America, Africa, Arab states, Southeast Asia, to name only a few geographic areas, are lagging behind in major ways. Furthermore, professionals, academics, and experts in the field of AI are overwhelmingly men-based in North America, China, Japan, or Europe, leading to well-recorded gender and ethnic cultural biases when it comes to AI technologies, not necessarily intentional. Diversity is key to preventing any kind of bias, and we cannot neglect it. All voices count, and if we disregard diversity, it would lead to a major data bias in the data sets, and this is commonly understood and known today, that the data sets and the quality of the data sets needs to be one of the first dimensions we look at. And significant technology and social issues in the future could otherwise be coming our way that we would need to deal with. Now, if we look at languages and dialects in the world, we can count nearly 7,000 different ones, yet only 7% are reflected in published online material. Swahili, for example, is not supported by large platforms. Arabic, although the fourth most spoken language, only accounts for 1 to 3% of the online content. AI-powered voice assistants only work in 8 languages. 50% of the web pages are written in English, and 75% of the web's top-level domains come from Europe and North America. So there are real issues regarding lack of diversity in internet content, which very quickly would translate if it's not addressed to AI algorithms and other applications. So as an organization whose missions encompasses science, culture, and education, UNESCO is strategically and uniquely placed to address the full spectrum of issues around AI. So taking into consideration the multiplicity of approaches to technology found in different cultures is a prerequisite to addressing these issues. And diversity must be integrated in every single step of the AI lifecycle, from creation of algorithms to the collection of data, down to the numerous applications of AI in every aspect of today's society. Healthcare, for example, education, transportation, and so forth. And this is the only way to ensure all voices will contribute to the development of ethics, tools, policies, and frameworks for AI. So these are the dimensions that the UNESCO normative instrument are addressing. In particular, in fact, they're addressing dimensions that link very much to the dimensions I mentioned, but also it stands out as a text that brings the environmental and climate dimensions into the picture linked to AI technology, and also heavily addresses the gender equality dimensions and minority dimensions when it comes to AI applications. So with those words, I again just want to thank you for the opportunity and congratulate you on your initiative. And I noticed the call to the UN to act. This is UNESCO's contribution to that call. We hope this will be a useful instrument. We don't pretend it's easy to negotiate it. There is not consensus on everything, but we are in the middle of that negotiation this week. So by the end of the week, we'll know more. And the process going forward will lead to a decision by 193 member states, as I mentioned, in November. And hopefully that will then lead to the first global ethical normative instrument on artificial intelligence. Thank you very much.